Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lap Podcast. I am Tristan Ryans. This is episode 10 of season 2 of your Destination Formula One podcast. It is just me today. No Kevin Walker this time. He is preparing for his college graduation. So TLPs, please drop a congratulations down in the comments below. We're all incredibly proud of Kevin finishing up his university experience with a bachelor's degree. We're incredibly excited for him. So make sure to give him all the love you possibly can down in the comments below. But he's tied up, but you got me this week to talk about this Miami Grand Prix. If you haven't already, like the podcast, hit subscribe. It costs you absolutely nothing at all to support the channel. Helps us move up the algorithm and get put in front of more Formula One fans like yourself. Feel free to follow us on the socials. They are scrolling at the bottom of the screen as we speak. You can support me. You can support Kevin. You can support the channel on all the social medias at The Lap Pod. And let's just get right into it. As I'm recording today, it is Wednesday, and we've had a ton of developments out of the Alpine camp. Most notably, Alpine confirming that Franco Colapinto is going to replace Jack Doohan for the next 5 rounds as the team opts to rotate the seat. So Jack Doohan moved back into the reserve role. Franco Colapinto graduating from that reserve role into the full-time seat. Well, part-time seat is what it kind of feels like this season. And why sideline Jack Doohan, I think, is the first question. There's a number of ways we can look at this, but let's just start here. Why would you want to sideline Jack Doohan? You started the season with him. You gave him an extra race last year to start to prove himself, get comfortable with the team, start understanding the procedures. And Jack Doohan has tried his best to stay afloat at Alpine with a massive target on his back. And he was given the opportunity to prove himself, but he has thus far failed within those goals. He just has not quite met the moment. And I, like many fans of the sport, look, I think I was rooting for Jack Doohan at a certain level. If you go back and watch the preseason podcast, I talked about what was at stake for pretty much every single driver walking up and down the grid. Jack Doohan's goals and Jack Doohan's ambitions and Jack Doohan's expectations and the targets were very clearly outlined. And so far, it just hasn't quite gone his way. It's been somewhat of a disappointing season. And look, I understand the pressure that was put on Jack Doohan immediately after Franco Colapinto came over from Williams, became the Alpine reserve driver after having some success at Williams last year in the replacement of Logan Sargent. Obviously, with the addition of Carlos Sainz to pair with Alex Albon, you have an odd man out situation, the most vulnerable seat on the grid being this Alpine seat. Franco Colapinto saw it as an opportunity. Flavio Briatore, sees this as an opportunity for Alpine, and it put a lot of pressure on the young Australian driver. But look, even through all the pressure that is Formula One, the pressure cooker that is this sport, Jack Doohan just didn't really deliver up to this point. A DNF in Australia, and we can argue that that's a wash. It was a super tumultuous race where about a third of the grid crashed. We can call that one a wash. But then there was contact with Gabriel Bortoleto in the Chinese sprint. He ended up finishing in last place in that. A huge crash that cost the team money and resources and time and effort to re-put the car back together because of not closing the DRS flap. A poor form in Saudi Arabia to finish nearly last, and then DNFing in Miami on lap 1. There was some good there as well. He had some strong performance in Bahrain, and the raw pace was pretty solid for Jack Doohan as far as being compared to his teammate in Pierre Gasly. But over the course of the season, throughout these first 6 rounds, you could argue that he's largely disappointed. I think I might have given him a C grade in our rookie temp check, our rookie grades up to that point in round 5, but the argument really could be made that it's maybe a D+ performance so far at best. And I can't really blame Alpine for making this move. His raw pace at times, I understand. You know, the decision to put Colapinto in, though, and scoring points across from Alex Albon last year, it's enticing. It's very sexy. It's going to draw you in. And Franco Colapinto is not without fault either. He had crashes in Las Vegas last year and a very tumultuous session in Brazil as well. So it's not like this is going to be a 100% slam dunk pick that's going to have no faults in the slightest in putting Franco Colapinto in this seat. But in comparison to Jack Doohan, you have a point-scoring driver from last year versus a guy who through 6 rounds this year has crashed the car repeatedly and can't seem to find his way into the points when the car even is kind of hooked up, coming kind of close, but really not being in that competitive scope so far, especially compared to the talent we're seeing from some of the other rookies within this class. So as far as Colapinto is concerned, I think the expectations after maybe a race or two of settling in, we'll probably see him competing pretty closely with Pierre Gasly. A midseason driver switch is always very challenging. Heck, ask Yuki Tsunoda and ask Liam Lawson. That exchange is still being graded as we speak. But we've seen from Colapinto that he has some damn good pace, but I think it would be a bit of a surprise if he was out qualifying Pierre Gasly immediately. As far as the other part of this story, some of the other things that have come out of this story, Oliver Oakes has also stepped away from the Alpine racing team. A statement put out, this is on their social media platform, the Alpine F1 team X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, announcing that Oliver Oakes resigned from his role as the team principal. The team accepted his resignation with immediate effect. Flavio Briatore is going to become the executive advisor as well as the team principal of Alpine. They thanked Oliver for his efforts. He granted this, he's nabbed the 6th place last year, and they just decided not to really make any extra comments at that point. And I think it's incredibly possible, and it's probably very likely that these two decisions were 100% connected. Flavio Briatore winning out in the swap and assuming the duties of the team principal role with Oakes now out of the picture. Oakes now the 4th team principal in 4 years for this team. And Oliver Oakes had a lot of success, but at the same time, it just didn't quite come together for the team and in the way that maybe they were expecting it to. 6th place last year, I think more or less. 6th place last year was kind of the best you could possibly hope for. Oliver Oakes coming in mid-season, taking over from Bruno Firmin and delivering was incredibly inspiring. If you're an Alpine racing fan, you didn't really want to see Oliver Oakes go. I mean, obviously there's a lot of great history with Flavio Briatore, which we're going to talk about here in a few moments, but losing Oliver Oakes within all of this, it's an unfortunate circumstance considering the feeling of the Alpine team overall. They had been positive. They've been moving in a good direction since he assumed duties last year for this team. Alpine finished once again in 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, grabbing an insane double podium with Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly in Brazil. And they've shown some signs of life this year. A really strong performance from Pierre Gasly, nearly grabbing a P6 out of Max Verstappen, pulling it away from him in Bahrain. But it's really unfortunate to see this happening once again. There are going to be a lot of questions raised about this Alpine racing team, as there should be. Having 4 team principals over the course of 4 years is not a sign of health within this organization. It's not something that's promising. And if you're a part of this organization, seeing all the things that have come and gone, seeing everything that's changed hands in the time that you have been at Alpine, there's been a lot of movement. There's been a lot of drastic changes, including changes from infrastructure, and asking the question, really, what does this say about Alpine? The once banned F1 team principal Briatore coming back into the fold as that advisor, now taking over command as the team principal. Alpine have been back and forth messes within this current regulation set. Renault even pulling themselves out of the engine supplier mix. Alpine becoming a Mercedes customer starting next year. Briatore following a judge overturning his ban after the Crashgate scandal. Very controversial incident within Formula One history. Please, if you're not really familiar with this situation, go look into it. But Briatore, controversial, but at the same time, a proven winner as well. Him taking over this role, I think, continues that trend of controversial, but at the same time, I kind of get it. Who else would make sense for this role other than Briatore? And he's a very accomplished member of the sport. Overall, he's had multiple drivers and constructors titles in the past. He's accomplished, and now he's got even more power over this Alpine Formula One team with Oakes' departure. In a nutshell, the driver movement the administrative movement, the team principal movement, the engine movement, everything happening within Alpine right now, it's really doing nothing but, proposing questions and asking questions and not really providing a lot of answers. At the end of the day, performance is going to speak for itself, maybe, but there seems to just be things that are maybe rotten at the core here when it comes to Alpine. Normally, you wouldn't really want to see a midseason driver switch. You certainly wouldn't want to see this much administrative turnover and the organization overall pulling completely out of the sport, a very historic and storied organization pulling out of the sport from an engine supplier standpoint. I know they had struggled within these regulations to really, get it together, but at the same time, you got to have a lot of questions. I'm not exactly sure how to answer all these at this juncture, but, I do feel bad for Jack Doohan. But if Franco Colapinto isn't delivering either, maybe that's going to propose a lot more questions as well. Maybe it's going to answer some. So we're going to have a lot of stuff to look forward to as, Alpine is concerned. It's Franco Colapinto's turn, but at the same time, man, Alpine right now, overall temperature check, it just feels messy and kind of all over the place. We also got some reveals in Miami, though. We got a glance at the Cadillac Formula One team. They had a big reveal event where they posted this very cool, very interesting video dropping their logo. They're going to go all chrome is what it looks like when it comes to their logo. Cadillac, from a brand perspective, have a lot of different colors within this video here. Can't really show the whole video. I don't want to get risky here, but I can show some imaging. A lot of different colors we're still seeing here. I'm not exactly sure they're going to just do a black and silver concept for the entire car. You got some iconic red here. You got some blue here. Got some yellow here. So I think we're probably still going to see some colors with this team. We also got a chance to see some of the team fashion here, the way that they maybe want to market themselves. I'm really curious to see exactly what this car is going to look like. We got to see some pictures as well of the team taking a look at some of the racing kits as well. So at a glance, we got some suits, we got some colors. Black, white, chrome seem to be the big fixtures here. Red, blue, gold, and yellow in the teaser for the America's next team. They're going to be debuting next season. I know a lot of fans are actually pretty excited about this. There's a lot of rumor so far about who exactly the driver lineup is going to be. A lot of rumors that it's going to be Checo Perez, that it's going to be Mick Schumacher, that it's probably going to be somebody coming over from IndyCar, maybe a Colton Herta. We're still waiting to find out exactly. I would say if you're asking me and you're pressing me right now exactly who's going to be driving for Cadillac next year, I would not be shocked in the slightest if we see Sergio Perez back on the grid. He's going to bring a lot of money. He's going to bring a lot of sponsors. He's going to bring a lot of endorsements. And he's an accomplished Formula One driver with a history of winning as well. So as a team kind of gets its feet underneath them, I imagine that Sergio Perez is going to be a guy that can walk in and kind of point at things and go, this is how we did it at Red Bull. This is how we won championships at Red Bull doing this. This is a procedure that maybe we should approach it this way or this way. I think Sergio Perez would absolutely add a lot of value to a Cadillac Formula One team. And especially while the expectations are low, you just need somebody that can help steer this ship. So if they decide to go with Sergio Perez, I'd be a big fan of that decision. Mick Schumacher was also spotted in Miami this past weekend alongside some members of his management team, if I'm not mistaken. There's speculation he could be in the running for that second seat with Cadillac as well. Of course, another experienced Formula One driver. Things didn't work out at Haas. Spent some time within the Mercedes family as their reserve driver, working on the simulators. So it'd be really interesting if we saw Mick Schumacher back on the grid. I don't know exactly if he is going to get this seat, but his name being thrown out and about for every available seat over the last year or two has remained a constant. He spent some time doing World Endurance Championship driving alongside Alpine, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So he's remained around the sport. Obviously, his father, Michael Schumacher, a huge name in this sport, and that name alone is probably going to help him out as far as his next position, as far as his next seat is concerned. Quick moment here, doing the whole thing myself. Got to get a little water. Thank you. But onto the actual racing from this weekend. Man, we had some exciting stuff happen this weekend. And first off, I want to talk about Kimi Antonelli's insane pole sprint, Kimi Antonelli's insane pull in the sprint qualifying. It was electric, taking his first career pole position across any format, becoming the youngest driver ever to land a pole position. He beat out Oscar Piastri by 400 thousandths, or excuse me, hundredths of a second. Max Verstappen by a tenth of a second at just 18 years old. He's exceeding expectations so far. I know that the Netflix documentary thing with WhatsApp for Mercedes called The Seat just dropped. I got a chance to watch that. It's about 40 minutes. If you haven't watched that, I want to say I do encourage checking that out. It shows a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of infrastructure things that maybe you're not necessarily aware of. I certainly wasn't before watching it, seeing the process, how it goes. It's kind of an ad for WhatsApp. WhatsApp, feel free to sponsor the pod. But through it all, it does show a lot of who he is, his background, where he comes from as well. Kimi Antonelli's been being brought up to become this racing phenom ever since, a very, very, very young age. And it makes a lot of sense that he is already this fast, producing at such a high level already within just his first 6 races at the Formula One level. Unfortunately, had a rough sprint, though. Wild weather, changing track conditions, set the entire grid into a pit stop frenzy. Red Bull released Verstappen too early, hit Antonelli, and basically gave him a drive-through penalty because he had to come back around and then repit again. Finished 11th place in the sprint, but through it all, getting a pole position at this point in a car that's arguably the second fastest on the grid, still massive, massive, massive for the rookie who has never raced in Miami before. And it's going to start bringing up some questions. One of the questions that came to mind for me first as this was all kind of breaking down, as this was all happening, was, is it possible that Kimi Antonelli might get a win this season before George Russell? To answer my own question, probably not. George Russell's been a lot better on race day. He's had really, really, really strong race pace this year. Obviously, he's got a number of podiums this year, one of the most consistent drivers this season. But I don't think Kimi Antonelli getting a win is as far-fetched as maybe I believed it, as maybe you believed it, TLPs. You guys let me know what you think of Kimi Antonelli so far this season down in the comments below, because the kid's been driving absolutely phenomenally, out of his mind. My expectations this year were maybe he grabs a podium, he might get lucky and find himself on like the third step or something, but grabbing a pole position was not something that I expected at all. He's coming along really, really, really quickly. He's adapting to the car very fast. He's adapting to Formula One life very quickly as well. And he's showing that he has insane one-lap pace already at this point. And this is as bad as he might ever be in Formula One. And the biggest things here that he still needs to learn is just his race pace and his race craft still need some work at the Formula One level. There are obviously things happening in the first lap against Oscar Piastri, who's been here, done that for a little bit longer, showing him, taking him to school a little bit, right, on that incident, and Kimi feeling like he was maybe pushed off. But reality is, kid, like that's just racing at this level. It's going to be close. It's going to be competitive. And sometimes you got to keep your foot in too, and make sure you're conscientious of those lines. So there are definitely some learning moments still within this weekend, but to grab a pole, to sit in front of a Max Verstappen, to sit in front of the world championship leader in Oscar Piastri, to sit in front of your teammate who's well accomplished and a multiple race winner in George Russell across any of these formats, and then beating him again in qualifying for the race was massive. I mean, Mercedes got a good one. As a Mercedes fan myself, I'm excited. But as a Kimi Antonelli fan, I just can't wait to see what the future holds for this young, very standout talent. I'm incredibly excited. And amid all the madness, another driver certainly benefited within this sprint as well. And I want to talk about Lando Norris. And if Kevin's watching this right now, I'm sure he's running in the comments and tell me not to besmirch his boy, or if you're a Lando Norris fan, you think I'm going to go one way or the other. But look, I'm just going to give you my honest takes here. They had a pit offset with Oscar Piastri. Lando and Norris approached the pits, and Liam Lawson colliding with Fernando Alonso, and they've got some beef after a couple of incidents last year too. Caused a safety car after the Aston Martin hit the wall, I think between turns 13, 14, around that range. McLaren kind of granting Lando Norris this Johnny on the spot. We're already calling him into pit with the timing offset being about 13, 14 seconds. The drive-through is about 19 seconds total, but under safety car, only 11 seconds of an offset. Lando Norris right where he needed to be to gather the sprint win. Good for him. At the same time, you got to be in the right place at the right time. The sprint overall was complete madness. Charles Leclerc didn't even make it to the grid. He hit the wall on a practice lap before the session. Carlos Sainz clipped the wall, span out, caught a flat, and had to retire as well. I can't really knock Lando Norris for the win. Is some wild luck, but this was definitely Oscar Piastri's race to take, whether the incidents happened or not. Still landing P2, finishing pretty closely as well. At the end of the day, a win's a win's a win. You're going to take them as they come. You can't really help something like that happening. But this is another race that Lando Norris could have very well not won, right? This is another one in the win column this year. The 2 wins he has across all formats, a little bit questionable in my opinion. A little bit more here. It's a cruel business. Oscar Piastri even said it. He left disheartened after the sprint strategy call, sees Norris continue his luck in Miami. And like I said, I think there is a little bit of a luck factor here. Lando Norris is still very much so in this championship fight, still sitting in P2 in the World Drivers' Championship. But the way of this championship has gone a little bit elsewhere and gone a little bit more towards, of course, Oscar Piastri, who also had a very successful weekend we're going to talk about in a few moments. But continuing along the grid, actually, give me a moment. I'm going to take another sip of my water. I've been yapping for a little while, folks. Excuse me. Thank you. Goodness. Moving along the grid, Max Verstappen just keeps showing us what he's made of. Following an insane sprint, we get another incredible display from Max Verstappen in qualifying, hauling the Red Bull back to the top step, beating out Norris by 0.06 of a second, Antonelli by 0.06 of a second. The margin between P2 and P3, 0.02 of a second, which was insane. Piastri by over a tenth and a half. So Verstappen then proceeding to defend like hell against both of the McLarens, making both of the papaya drivers have to work for it to earn the 1-2 in Miami during the feature race. And at one point defending Piastri for so long that Lando Norris crept back into striking distance from like 10 or so seconds back. And then he held up Lando Norris for what felt like an eternity, and that allowed Piastri to get back ahead by like 10 to 13 seconds. At the end of it all, a tire offset between him and the Mercedes of George Russell allowed the Mercedes to overtake. Through the pits, jumped Max for the final podium place, but Verstappen netting a really strong P4. Inspector Max, Principal Max also calling out potential a little bit of what he saw was maybe George not lifting, but stewards took a look at it, decided that there really wasn't anything there under the yellow flags. But Max showing us again and again that he is a generational talent, keeping himself in this drivers' championship fight, netting himself, remaining in P3 in this drivers' championship. He's only 32 points away from the championship lead. And as a fan of the sport, who came into this sport obviously much more recently than some of the veterans of this sport, who, like probably many of you guys, came into being fans of this sport very recently. We've only seen Max dominate up to this point. My experience in Formula One, watching him through 2023, it was the Max Verstappen podcast every single weekend. Now that the field is closer, or now that he's not necessarily winning every single weekend, it's something that you get to appreciate a little bit more, seeing just how talented Max Verstappen is, seeing just how elite of a driver he is, how generational of a driver he is. It makes you appreciate it a lot more. And seeing the things that Max is doing in the car, whether you love him, like him, hate him, you got to respect him. And he's keeping this championship very, very, very interesting week in, week out. But at the end of it all, it was still very much so a McLaren-dominated weekend. It was still very much so the papaya race to lose. Even though Andrea Stella was a bit surprised by the performance, after it was all said and done, The McLarens dusted the competition in Miami. They had ridiculous race pace, finishing within about 4 seconds of each other. But the next closest constructor, 33 seconds in the rear view mirror, Mercedes of George Russell finishing. It took a while. I'll just put it like that. It took a while for us to finally see George Russell cross the finish line, with Max Verstappen just 2.5 seconds behind him. McLaren, look, I'm going to chalk it up. Honestly, they developed the hell out of this car. They finish out this regulation. They've got a car that treats the tires insanely well. They manage the balance incredibly well, working with their aerodynamic efficiency from beginning to end. This car was hooked up, ready to go, souped, and at peak performance for Miami to nab a 1-2 in such drastic fashion. The biggest win, if I'm not mistaken, Lando Norris had last year was like 22 seconds. Both of the drivers for the McLarens finishing over 30 seconds, almost 30 seconds ahead anyway of the Mercedes behind. They're 105 points currently ahead of Mercedes after 6 rounds. And look, I know at the end of it all, this is still super, super, super early in the season. We've still got a ton of racing to go. Developments are going to be coming from all across the grid, but having that much of a lead, having those kind of performances to bank are going to make holding a constructors championship that much easier. If you're Oscar Piastri or if you're Lando Norris trying to fight for a drivers championship, having this much of a buffer is certainly going to help things down the road as well. Ask Max Verstappen last year. The car went from first to third place very quickly, but being able to hold on to that drivers championship, it made all the difference. Those early season performances. Look, the battle for the championship at this point, it looks very much so in McLaren's hand. It is McLaren's constructors to lose. As far as the drivers championship is concerned, I think we're still going to see some developments coming. Red Bull seem very, very, very keen to try to make this another drivers championship for Max Verstappen this season. They're going to put a lot of work and a lot of effort into this current regulation, a lot of ambiguity around what it's going to look like next year as they begin their Ford partnership. They're building their own power units, kind of a 70-30 situation where it's 70% Red Bull, 30% Ford as far as that partnership is concerned to build their power units. A lot has been said so far about what this next regulation looks like from a power unit perspective, but I would not be expecting Red Bull to be, leading the field 100%, beating the brakes off of everybody else to start this next regulation. So Red Bull are trying to put everything they possibly can to keeping Max Verstappen in this championship this year. And McLaren are going to have to do their work. If you're Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris, going to have to put in a lot of work to just keep the Dutchman at bay. But right now, it still very much so looks like if we continue this trajectory, it's Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri. Winner takes all. Who wants it more? And within this conversation, we can have it every single week. Oscar Piastri, I still see this going Oscar Piastri's way through the full course of a season. Piastri grabbing the top step 4 times this season in feature races. He's displayed such strong racecraft in his battles with Max Verstappen, in his battles alongside Lando Norris, in his battles against the other members of the field. He closed the gap to Norris in qualifying over these last, 2+ years. As far as just general qualifying pace, it can now go either way. And on the days where it goes Oscar's way, on the qualifying sessions where it's gone Oscar's way, he hasn't squandered those opportunities. He's so much more savvy in my eyes. He's better defending. He's better at overtaking. And on track, Norris has just not shown that he can clutch up when asked so far this year with 2 debatable wins. Let's just be completely frank. So Piastri's wins in my eyes are a lot less negotiable, a lot less debatable, a lot more definitive. Right now, Lando Norris still finding himself making mistakes, still finding himself being caught out, still being, shown the door by a Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri jumping whoever's sitting in P1, taking them all the way to turn 1 and making them work for it. And so far, that calm, cool demeanor is carrying him quite a long way. But look, McLaren are not the only team that had a really strong, notable weekend this weekend in Miami. Williams brought it. They 100% brought it. And I know Kevin was excited this weekend. We were texting about it the entire time, talking the whole race. Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz putting up some really strong performances. And Here it is. P5, P9, P5 for Alex Albon. He beat Antonelli by 7 seconds, was less than 10 seconds away from Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Alex Albon put forth a fantastic race this weekend. A moment of silence, and let's clap it up for him. Williams were fantastic. The helmet looked sick, by the way. Love the Florida orange shout out. It looked really good. Carlos Sainz doing his thing as well, finishing P9 behind both the Ferraris, which we're going to get to that. Don't worry. But Alex Albon, a strong P5. He cleared the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli in the process, made it look easy, almost slam dunk-like the way that the Williams were treating their tires, the way that Alex Albon was not waiting around. There was a switch at one point, and he basically took it back from Carlos Sainz, very much so showing this is my race. I got this, and being very comfortable within his element. Sainz caught by the two Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. This last corner incident with Hamilton being the talk of the town, a lot of conversation with Lewis Hamilton taking a very interesting line is what the sentiment seems to be. But overall, racing incident is what it was chalked up to. I don't think that I saw that there was a penalty for Lewis Hamilton after the fact. Obviously, Carlos Sainz had a lot to say about this post-race. A lot of comments and a lot of controversial, opinions about it. But as we look through the footage here, kind of an awkward line from Lewis Hamilton. He was ahead, but you could also argue that Carlos Sainz was kind of dive bombing here to try to, snag a last lap, last turn, final position, and jeopardizing both of their races kind of in the process. Quite a bit of contact here too, as you can see, between these two drivers. Luckily, both of these cars actually crossed the line and were able to finish the race. But overall, I mean, let's clap it up for Williams, because this was a fantastic weekend. We can't count on them doing this every single weekend for sure, but over the course of the season so far, I've been proved pretty wrong. Kevin so far probably sitting here watching this very smugly, and maybe, I just want to know what you guys think, to be completely honest. The TLPs, what do you think so far of this performance this season by the Williams team? I mean, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, they have been bringing it every single week. They look good. I'm going to be completely honest. They look pretty dang good. They're a lot of fun to watch this year as well. While the rest of the midfield is kind of sorting itself out, Williams are very much so taking that step. They're taking that baton and they're running with it. But speaking of that incident with Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton, we do have to talk about Lewis Hamilton. Lewis was spicy on the radio messages this past weekend, exchanging back and forth with his engineer, Ricardo Adami, if I'm not mistaken. Adami, the 7-time champ. He was letting him hear it. There was at one point saying, have a tea break while you're at it, while they were trying to swap places with him and Charles. Lewis wanting to go ahead to go fight Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. It was a really frustrating experience, is what Lewis said post-race. Man, there were some other comments here too. It just didn't really work out. Later in the race, Ferrari swapped the drivers back. Leclerc would go charge after the Williams, and with a notice that, hey, Carlos Sainz is this much time behind. I think it was like 1.7 seconds. Lewis Hamilton responding with, do you want me to let him by too? Post-race, he chalked it up as a lack of immediacy in the moment at times, high-octane competition, indecision from the engineers, and not getting enough feedback, enough information very quickly. But overall, from a performance perspective, the Ferrari team, they took a step back this week. They finished 7th and 8th, which is not necessarily where you want to be if you're Ferrari, almost a minute behind Oscar Piastri, all the way in first place. I don't blame him for being frustrated. I understand that his expectations walking in were that they were going to be competing for podiums. They were going to be competing for the top step. And while Lewis Hamilton does have a win this year in the Chinese sprint, this is a man who is used to winning. This is a man who is used to fighting for those podiums. This is a guy who is used to fighting for championship, caliber, performances for accolades, excuse me. So overall, yes, though, this is very much so an adjustment year. I said it last week on the podcast. I said it last week in a video. We talked about it a lot over the last few weeks. The frustration seems to be boiling over. I think if you're Ferrari, Fred Vasseur talking about how we, talked to Lewis, kind of patted him on the shoulder and told him to relax, like you kind of do if you're Lewis Hamilton. At the end of the day, it's competition, but understanding where this car is week in, week out, you can't necessarily, with how it's performing so far, barring some more major upgrades that are going to completely change the game, and maybe they find like half a second of pace, which would be unheard of mid-season. I think that the temperament of expectations, just take everything in. Learn everything you possibly can if you're Lewis Hamilton. That way, next year, when you're walking into 2026, the regulations change. You understand this procedure. You understand how it works. You understand how to communicate with your race engineer. You understand what they're expecting, what you're expecting. Things are meshing well. But right now, they're here. When in a year's time, they're going to be like right here. Okay, just a little bit of patience. We all want to see Lewis Hamilton fighting for wins. We all want to see a 7-time world champion remaining in the mix. Right now, it's been very frustrating. And I understand. At the end of the day, everybody wants to win. And a guy who's won a lot in his career has the record for the most wins in Formula One's history. This guy's used to winning. This guy's used to, driving at a championship caliber level, to having those opportunities to do so. I understand. It's got to be 100% frustrating. Moving off track, though, we have some interesting things that have also popped up today within the last couple of days. Well, maybe. Carlos Sainz Sr., possibly in the running for the FIA presidency. Surprising news Wednesday that came across my desk. Another name thrown into the speculation ring for the FIA presidency against Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Carlos Sainz Sr. Sainz, of course, the father of the Williams driver we were just talking about a little while ago. He's a former World Rally champion, a Dakar winner. Autosport.com's Rebecca Clancy reporting that Sainz has been urged to run by some major names in the world of motorsports. He's joining a list of speculative candidates to run alongside F1 Academy's lead, Susie Wolff. Her name's also been tossed around in conversations for the FIA presidency. She's also the significant other of Mercedes F1 CEO Toto Wolff. So Sulayem's is a very controversial figure, I think, within Formula One. I don't know that I've run into anybody who loves Mohammed Ben Sulayem. I think a lot of racing fans probably have some level of displeasure for Mohammed Ben Sulayem, and I kind of get it. A number of major figures in the FIA around him have been resigning. There's been a lot of controversial moments, common sentiment being the lack of due process, breakdowns in standards, and a more dictatorial approach to governance than transparency and democracy. A lot of this kind of detailed here in the Autosport article. I honestly do recommend you check it out and read it if you have not yet. Members of the FIA held out of councils, refusing to sign non-disclosures. Rules and crackdowns, including the swearing ban, have led to even driver protests in the World Rally Championships. They weren't taking interviews in English with members of the press because they were displeased with the way that the rule, that the FIA were handing out this rule or trying to govern this rule. So there's a lot going on there, and I'm not even done yet. There's going to be an official vote that happens late this December, and whether it's Sainz or whether it's Susie Wolff, I won't be shocked if in a year's time we have a completely new president of the FIA, because Sulayem has shown himself to be such an unlikable figure. And I'm not even done talking about Sulayem today. The overall experience around him, the sentiment around Sulayem, around MBS, has been wholly and almost universally negative. And I can only imagine what working underneath him must be like, considering everything that we have heard. Whatever your guys' thoughts, TLPs, please let me know what you think of this situation. Who do you think might be a really good fit? Why they might be a good fit? I mean, let us know down in the comments. I want to know what you guys think of this situation as well, because as this is somebody, and this is a very major figure in who makes the rules, who decides things, who hands out punishments, who helps enforce certain regulations, helps make big decisions. And speaking of Mohammed Ben Sulayem, he's also been a bit in the news as well because he had some comments about the budget caps in Formula One. This might be of interest to you. So after 5 years, the FIA, they might very well be scrapping the cost cap. But let's take this with a grain of salt. I want to take it with a big grain of salt, because Mohammed Ben Sulayem also said he might, has not done so as far as I've seen, ease the penalties on the swearing rule. But again, I don't think he has yet. So again, take it with a grain of salt. So I am telling the AP, the Associated Press, at the Miami Grand Prix that the cost cap has been a headache to the FIA, calling it basically a hassle. Let me see. They've been looking into it, looking at the cost cap, and it's just giving the FIA a headache. What's the point of it? He said about an hour before the race at Hard Rock Stadium. And the cost cap's a positive for some, a negative for others. And I kind of want to break down at least my thoughts, my pros, my cons on the proposal of a budget cap. Him proposing getting rid of it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. The same way that proposing the swearing ban is going to go out the window doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. These are things that he helped enforce, he helped create, he helped, shape. So the infrastructure for all these things being put in place by him, he may not be so willing to just scrap them. But this one, to me, I can understand and it feels like it might make some sense. The pros for the non-cost cap, so removing the cost cap. In a nutshell, the best team who develops the best car will be more competitive, simply put. The organization, the infrastructure can handle the pursuit of chasing a championship or is willing to make the sacrifices monetarily as well as infrastructurally to win, can win at that point. So if you're behind, let's say, you're behind by a tenth or 2/10, on just general pace, you can put more resources into finding those gains rather than being limited within a cost cap, rather than having to slowly build back. You'd be able to do it a lot more aggressively. This is how Formula One has been managed for decades and decades and decades of this championship. The cons for the non-cost cap is that big spenders, they tend to dominate. And if you're willing to spend the most money on your car, if you're willing to put the most infrastructure behind your car, you're putting the most resources behind your car, and you can afford to do so, well, it means you're probably going to have the cream rise to the top and it'd be a lot more clearly defined. The bunching that the cost cap has created as far as the overall performance of the cars, the separation of the cars, it's a lot tighter of a field now. But I would still say that the cost cap, with it being in place, there's still only 2 to 3 teams, 4 teams really, that are winning races. But the pros for the cost cap: keep the field a lot more condensed. It forces teams to be more intentional about their development direction. One team can effectively spend its way to a title, basically throwing new developments at the wall every single weekend until you find something that sticks. And I don't imagine these teams necessarily purposefully waste money and waste time and resources. But if you're trying to find gains, you're not really sure where it's working, you're not correlating very well with the simulator, things just aren't quite connecting, you can really only get it on track, you might be a little bit more apt to just throw stuff at this metaphorical wall. And smaller teams, from a general perspective, if you're a Haas, if you're Williams of late, right, they've got a lot more backing nowadays, but let's say you're Stake and you're going to become Audi in Switzerland with all this new infrastructure. Smaller teams across the grid, they're not going to have the same kind of money. They're not going to have the same kind of backing. They're not going to have the same kind of infrastructure, which means they're not going to be able to just throw money, so to speak, at these kinds of problems and just catch up and become competitive once again. Along with the cost cap came regulation of aero and CFD, computational fluid dynamics testing. So you had regulations that basically halted how much time you could spend within the simulator, and it allowed teams to become overall more profitable. So those are pros. Going back into the aero and CFD testing regulations, putting halts on these things. This also did kind of help narrow the field, because if let's say you're the team that won the year prior, you have a lot less time to aerodynamically test your parts, your components, everything else that goes into the fuel system, how effective your fuel can be, how strongly it works within all your components, blah, 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 blah. This being regulated down, worse teams had more time and a lot more resources to do these things from a on paper time perspective. Better teams had less. So you started to kind of meet in the middle, and the playing field kind of evens out. I would say from a cost cap perspective, the cons of this, developments to catch up take a lot longer to come. Gaps to cars remain for a longer period of time. So if you're a Red Bull, you can dominate the sport really early if you have nailed the regulations, because your opponents, they just simply don't have enough time. They don't have enough money. They have to allocate very specifically and hope that they find the developments where they are crucial in order to catch up. but it takes a lot longer and the seasons remain a lot more predictable. It limits the technological battle. And this is the technological peak of motorsports. Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. It touts itself that way by having a cost cap in place. The idea to build the fastest car possible for the best drivers, it limits these things, so to speak. So I want to know what you guys think. TLPs, let me know if you are for a cost cap. Maybe you're against a cost cap. Let me know down in the comments below. I'm really curious. This is a very ongoing conversation. If the FIA decides to go away from this, the field might spread out more, but you could argue that our championships could be a lot more interesting. We do have a few really big dogs in this fight. We still had amazing championship battles before the cost cap. We're still going to have amazing championship battles as we go forward with Formula One as well. But I'm really curious to see what you guys think. If you asked me and you pressed me right now, should they take away the cost cap? Should they keep the cost cap? I might be more inclined to say take it away. I want to see peak performance from peak teams and peak drivers and guys competing for championships at the highest level, pushing for every inch. From an engineering perspective, I want to see as much as they possibly can put onto these cars. I want to see the development, and I want to see that competition too, not just on track and not just a squished down condensed hamburger of competition that's still only being won by 3 to 4 teams at best. I want to see the peaks of development. I want to see the peaks of engineering. I want to see the pinnacle of motorsport. If it's restricted by the cost cap, so be it. It is what it is right now. But I 100%, if it makes things a little bit easier on the FIA, they can just focus on governing and maybe making the correct decisions there rather than worrying about auditing Formula One teams about who went over $100,000 or $200,000 or not. These are things that I'd be a lot more interested in seeing. So push come to shove right now, I think I would be in favor of them removing the cost cap. But that's just me. I want to know what you guys think. TLPs, drop your comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. But that being said, I've been yapping at y'all for a long time here. It's about 47 or so minutes. That's all we got for this week. Next week, we are going to be previewing the Italian Grand Prix from Imola, a historic venue, one of the best circuits on the calendar, if I'm being completely honest, one of my favorites. We're talking all the on-track madness, the drama, the fallout. Make sure to like and subscribe. A reminder, it costs you absolutely nothing at all to subscribe and support this channel. So please, please, please hit that subscribe button. It costs $0.00. But if you're feeling a little dangerous, feel free to share it with your friends, your family, other Formula One fans. Get the word out on us. Follow the socials. They've been scrolling at the bottom of the screen this entire time. I'm Tristan Ryans. Until next time, be safe, be well, and let's go racing.